we take a little break from the ongoing Pahalgam issue, or maybe not quite a break, because we are talking about issues sitting on top of these challenges. That is national security challenges. And at this moment, national security advisors, NSAs, are in news. America is about to lose its new NSA, Mike Waltz. Pakistan has acquired a new NSA who isn't quite a new NSA. He was just the chief of the ISI, who actually should be more powerful than anybody in Pakistan. But the chief of the ISI, Lieutenant General Asim Malik, he has been nominated also the National Security Advisor of Pakistan. It's a complex thing, but nothing about Pakistan is not complex. So I will go into it a little bit as we go along. And then in India, there is no news with the NSA, but the news is that the new National Security Advisory Board has been constituted with 6 new members. In India, the 15-member National Security Advisory Board has been reconstituted with the appointment of 6 new members. These 6 new members, one each are from Army, Navy, Air Force, that is Air Marshal P.M. Sinha, who commanded the IAF Western Command, Lieutenant General A.K. Singh, the former GOC&C Southern Command, Rear Admiral Monty Khanna, who is a submariner, so he brings in that expertise. 2 senior IPS officers, Rajiv Ranjan Verma and Manmohan Singh. Manmohan Singh used to be Special Director in the Intelligence Bureau, and former diplomat B. Venkatesh Verma. He notably was our ambassador to Moscow for quite some time. So these members have come in. These developments give us an opportunity to look at some deeper issues. One, of course, is what's happened in Pakistan. That is, a little bit of it is par for the course, but it is still very interesting to understand how these things turn out in Pakistan. Remember how Musharraf, when he took over power, he was shy of calling himself president or prime minister or anything. So he called himself chief executive, right? Very much like Muhammad Yunus called himself chief advisor, because थोड़ा भी हर किसी की आंख में शर्म होता है. चोरी भी करी हो, even if you've grabbed power, you have थोड़ा सा आंख का शर्म. You are a little bit shy calling yourself president or whatever right away, president, prime minister, whatever right away. So Musharraf called himself chief executive. When he was coming to Agra for talks with Vajpayee, he used that as an excuse to say, look, I'm called chief executive of Pakistan. I'm meeting the Prime Minister of India. I can't just go as Pakistan can't be represented by a chief executive, so I'm making myself president. Why am I using that example? I'm using that example to tell you that in Pakistan, systems really don't exist. So whatever the almighty army wants, that happens. In this case now, you ask anybody who's the leader of Pakistan. Anybody halfway knowledgeable will tell you General Asim Munir. In fact, most people may not even remember the name of the current Prime Minister of Pakistan. Donald Trump said the other day, I know the leaders of both countries very well, etc. If somebody had asked him who's the leader of Pakistan, I'm quite sure he would not have said Shehbaz Sharif. I'm almost sure he would not have known General Asim Munir, nor does he know him from Adam. He would have, if he was really pressed, he would have said maybe that cricketer Imran Khan. So Pakistan is that kind of a complex system, but it also very simple in the sense that the army chief can do what he wants. In this case, what has he done? In this case, after what's happened in Pahalgam, they think there'll be talks or there'll be a back channel with India. They also know that other countries also have, almost every major country now has a national security advisor. So who will be talking on Pakistan's behalf? They had to appoint an NSA. They couldn't find anybody in a hurry. So they said the serving ISI chief will also be the NSA. It's a bit like saying the serving raw chief in India will be the NSA. Now, can you imagine the serving raw chief being also the NSA simultaneously in the rank of a cabinet minister? That's the position in Pakistan. This serving ISI chief, who's a lieutenant general, will now be the chief security advisor, national security advisor to the prime minister in the rank of a cabinet minister, while the army chief will carry on as the boss of everybody. Does he really bother about a cabinet position or rank or protocol, etc., etc.? This, however, has become a dual responsibility. This is unprecedented. You don't find this happening in most countries of any size, power, dimension, and this is a country with 170 nuclear weapons. So Pakistanis do take their national security seriously, but they also know their national security, policy planning, strategic planning, all reside in one place, which is the GHQ. And as long as the GHQ is in charge, they can make anybody anything. Now, the evolution of Pakistan's security structure is quite interesting, but we are not going there right now, except I can tell you very briefly. One, read a paper, Evolution of Pakistan's National Security Structures, written by Nasir Hafiz, published by Journal of Strategic Studies in the October 2023 edition. I will share a link with you. Please read that. It's fascinating. Some parts of it might look boring, but there is one highlight. Let's see how Pakistan's in India, and as we go ahead, I will try and convince you or show you how in India national security architecture changes, or new elements come in, or new institutions are created, almost always after a major crisis and often after a setback, because you learn and then you say, I will do something about this, right? There was something lacking, and that's how new security institutions come up. In Pakistan, the creation of new ones, or the dissolution of the old ones, or the return of the old ones, it all depends on what's happening to Pakistan's constitution. At one point, for example, Pakistan constitutes a National Security Council, but it is set up, it draws its powers from the 1973 constitution. But what happens when the 1973 constitution is suspended? Then the NSC also gets suspended. Then somebody brings 1973 constitution back with some amendments, but the NSC doesn't come back. So Pakistan's security architecture evolution is very much linked to Pakistan's political changes and many spells of military takeover, and also how it is interspersed with hybrid regimes. So again, in a hybrid regime, who has how much power? That determines your national security architecture. So we'll leave it there. Please read this paper by Nasir Hafiz. Now we come to India. When you come to India, see how the structure looks like now. I have a chart with me. You will have it on your screens. Prime Minister on the top, of course. Under him is National Security Advisor. CCS is listed to the side of the Prime Minister because CCS is the apex decision-making body in India. Of course, Prime Minister has the apex decision-making power. CCS, Cabinet Committee on Security, has Ministers of Home, Defense, Finance and the MEA. National Security Advisor sits at the same level. National Security Advisor, particularly this National Security Advisor, Ajit Doval, even in protocol is at the same level as the other ministers. Under this structure, Cabinet Committee on Security and National Security Advisor falls the National Security Council, then has 3 Deputy National Security Advisors. Ajit Doval is the National Security Advisor. There are 3 deputies. One is vacant right now. That is for Internal Affairs. Pankaj Singh, the former DG of BSF, was heading it. That's vacant. He retired. Deputy NSA for Strategic Affairs is Pawan Kapoor, former diplomat, 1990 batch. Deputy NSA again for technology and intelligence is TV Ravichandran, who's a former cop, might be understating it. He's a former top intelligence officer, and his key tasks are cyber security, ISRO, future technologies, etc. Then there is a bunch of advisors in specialized domains. So there is the National Cyber Security Coordinator, Lieutenant General M.U. Nair, who used to be the Army's Chief Signals Officer. Obviously, his domain is electronics. And Air Marshal Sandeep Singh as military advisor. He is the former Vice Chief of Air Staff. And Vice Admiral Biswajit Das Gupta, who's the National Maritime Security Coordinator, or NMSC. Then if you look at the same chart, then there are other groups there. It's quite a complex system now. Strategic Policy Group has a slightly complex history. It was constituted in 1999. 1998, India tested the nuclear weapons. 1974 was not weapons. It was a peaceful nuclear device. 1998, India became a nuclear weapon state. 1999, Strategic Policy Group was constituted. That's when KC Pant, former minister who had now come towards the BJP, former minister with the Congress party, he was now deputy chairman of the Planning Commission. And under him, a committee was set up to redesign India's national security architecture. And he came up with the idea, his committee came up with the idea of a strategic policy group. This strategic policy group was to be headed by cabinet secretary. It had the 3 service chiefs, etc., etc. All of the others were there, but the important thing was it was headed by the cabinet secretary. It was in 1999, a year later, that the position of National Security Advisor was formally constituted. And this chart, by the way, comes courtesy Nitin Gokhale, fine journalist, editor, strategic analyst. Nitin also runs Bharat Shakti and Strat News Global. Thank you, Nitin. However, as another paper, of which also I'm sharing a copy with you, this is a paper titled The Evolution of Indian National Security Architecture. It's a kind of parallel paper to the Pakistani paper that I shared with you. But if you read this one, you can see through these papers, you can also understand the political evolution of the two countries. One has had a purely democratic, stable, constitutional evolution to its political power. The other one has had a completely chaotic army now, army out, army in, army out, 73 constitution in, 73 constitution out kind of evolution to its national security structure. The only difference being that in Pakistan, one institution has always been in charge. That's the army. In the Indian system, if you read this paper, The Evolution of Indian National Security Architecture by P.S. Raghavan, who's a former senior diplomat, used to be our ambassador to Moscow as well, also was National Security Advisory Board chairman for a very long time. This paper was published in Journal of Defense Studies, brought out by the Institute of Defense Studies and Analysis in its July-September 2019 issue. He underlines the point that it's under Modi government now, at one point, through many reforms, that this anomaly in the constitution of the Strategic Planning Group, which used to be then convened by the Cabinet Secretary, that was removed. And now NSA was going to be in charge of that as well. So even under the Modi government, there have been many changes, starting with 2017, 2018, there was a committee. After 2019, there was another committee. Before all of this, I told you the changes that took place after the nuclear tests. India suddenly realized that India was talking to so many countries. There were dialogues going on national security. Other countries had national security advisors. India didn't have any. And that's how Brajesh Mishra became the first national security advisor. That's a job he did simultaneous to being the principal secretary to the prime minister. Now, at that point, maybe it was considered not so important to define the role of the national security advisor, because he drew his power also from being the principal secretary to the prime minister. Over time, this position has evolved, most notably under Modi governments in the 11th year, and with Ajit Doval, the same incumbent as the national security advisor. So now NSA chairs the strategic policy group. Now, the important thing to understand when it comes to the evolution of India's security architecture, I will list some Indian security organizations for you, most of which you know, and then I will mention to you when they were formed. Maybe just by looking at the dates and years of their founding, you can draw the conclusion which I am going to underline for you. So stay with me. ITBP, Indo-Tibetan Border Police, 24th of October 1962. Special Frontier Force, 14th November 1962. Special Services Bureau, SSB, 20th December 1963. Special Protection Group, 8th April 1985. SPG. NSG, National Security Guards, the Black Cats, 16th October 1984. Please note these dates, that's very important. Then I take you backwards a little bit and look at RNAW, 21st September 1968. BSF, Border Security Force, 1st December 1965. And then we jump decades back, and NIA, National Investigation Agency, 31st December 2008. NTRO, found October 2004, but did not really come into being then. It got stalled. Then there was an effort to revive it in 2009, early 2009. Early 2009 also is when NAT grid, which is a national grid of all the information that comes in all the state police forces and state police organizations. It used to be, the precursor for this used to be the Interstate Police Wireless. That also comes into being in 2009. So what are these dates telling you? Think about SFF, Special Frontier Force, 14 November 1962, SSB, 20th December 1963, and ITBP, 24th October 1962. What this tells us is that these three organizations, the founding of these three organizations was triggered by the debacle in the 1962 war against China. So ITBP was formed because the government realized that they needed a specialized force to patrol the Himalayan frontiers. That's also because with the ceasefire terms that the Chinese had imposed on India, they said that these borders now, line of actual control, only be patrolled by police or paramilitary forces, not by the regular army. That's why there was need then to set up a new organization. And ITBP came in. Special Frontier Force, again, because you now had to fight with the Chinese and something more structured was needed to carry the battle into the Chinese, into the Tibetan area. Special Frontier Force was like a commando force, but almost entirely, initially, almost entirely consisting of young Tibetans who wanted to fight for freedom within their own territory. And that was trained, it was put under the command of an Indian Major General, Major General S.S. Uban, and that was raised like that, SFF. So it came up at that time. And similarly, SSB, the idea, the philosophy of SSB then was to arm Indian people in areas bordering China or bordering Tibet. So these Indian people will be lightly armed and trained. So they could harass, carry out guerrilla attacks in case the Chinese were again able to come deeper inside Indian territory. That has now grown into a very large internal security force. Similarly, if you see BSF came up on 1st December 1965. India had just fought a full-fledged war with Pakistan, and the feeling was that the manning and patrolling of the border by the armed battalions of state police forces, say Punjab Police, Punjab Armed Police, Rajasthan Armed Constabulary, Gujarat State Reserve Police Force, etc., that wasn't adequate. Also, to leave it to each state caused coordination problems. So India now needed a dedicated border security force. That's how the BSF came in. It was a visionary thought at that point. Pakistan, by the way, already had the Rangers. So Pakistan was ahead of India in this business. Also, unlike India, Pakistan did not wait for a crisis to set up an institution like this. India founded the BSF on 1st December 1965, just a couple of months after the war. Again, RAW. Both 1962 and 65 had shown India that there were deep lacks and gaps in India's intelligence system. There was only the Intelligence Bureau, and for a long time, a formidable gentleman called B.N. Malik was heading the Intelligence Bureau. He had a lot of achievements. He also got quite a bit of bad press after 1962, and he was blamed for it. A thought process then started that India needed a separate organization for external intelligence, and that's how RAW came in. It was founded by R.N. Kao, who was earlier working in the original Intelligence Bureau, again a result of a crisis. Then we come to SPG 8th April 1985 and NSG 16th October 1986. So take your mind back to that period. Why would an organization like SPG be set up on 8th of April 1985? There was some planning that had taken place before that for a few months. What incident had happened before that? What crisis had arisen? If the institutions we had mentioned earlier arose in the wake of the two wars, 62 and 65, what is it that happened now? SPG was founded after the assassination of Mrs. Gandhi. Indira Gandhi was assassinated on 31st October 1984 by her own bodyguards drawn from Delhi police. And then a need was felt that the security of India's top leaders who live under those threat levels has to be given over to a new dedicated organization. SPG was founded because the need for a specialized organization to protect the Prime Minister and other top officials of the state, that is the Prime Minister and the President to begin with, that was realized after the assassination of Mrs. Gandhi by her own guards drawn from Delhi police. And that's how SPG was founded in the Rajiv Gandhi era. In the same Rajiv Gandhi era, next year came the NSG. The thought process for NSG was also triggered by a crisis, and that was Operation Blue Star. Because after Operation Blue Star, where Indian Army was used, there were mutinies in the army. Sikh soldiers got angry. Many Sikh units deserted en masse. And that got the government to think hard that such problems will arise again in future. India will continue to face terrorist challenges, and when that happens, will you keep sending in the army? So army is an institution that needs to be protected, because army should not be seen playing a partisan role in any of these internal security situations. But you need an organization which has an army-like ability, army-like training, and also specialized equipment and training for counter-terror operations. That's how SPG was founded. So NSG and SPG were both founded as a response to Operation Blue Star and Mrs. Gandhi's assassination. Then NIA comes up in 31st December 2008. We know what happened a month earlier, 26 November 2008, for the 26/11 attacks. That's when NTRO was also given a fresh wind and fresh fuel. So it found feet in some way, but not fully. NatGrid also was established in 2009, although it began operations much later in 2020. NatGrid and NIA both came into being as a result of the setback of 26/11, crisis and setback of 26/11. Once again, if you go over this list, this will tell you the story. What adjective you want to use for this story depends on you. I will not use an adjective, whether it is good or bad, but the fact is that most of India's national security structure has evolved following a crisis, from lessons learned from a crisis or lessons learned from certain actions like Pokhran 2, for example, which led to the formation of the institution of the National Security Advisor.